When the Legends Die, Chapter 30. He slept late, and when he wakened, there still was no sign of Red. He went down and ate a leisurely breakfast, went out to the arena, and killed the morning doing nothing. He ate the noon meal near the arena, then got his gear and went out to the chutes for a second go-round. The old man who helped him the day before came looking for Tom again. Didn't recognize him at first with the haircut and the new clothes. Then he grinned, whistled softly, hunkered down beside Tom, and watched the calf ropers. "What happened to your red-headed sidekick?" he asked. Tom shrugged and made no answer. The old man asked no more questions. Tom had drawn next to the last ride for the go-round. Even in the chute, while he was being saddled, Sleepwalker was just as mean as Tom had thought. When the gate swung open, Sleepwalker put on a spectacular ride, and Tom made one of the best, most brutal rides of his life, rough, hard, and punishing. The crowd didn't recognize him at first, then remembered his ride of the day before and began to applaud. Then it fell silent, awed at the cold viciousness and superb skill Tom showed. The horn blew and the crowd exploded in a roar of cheers. The horse was snorting bloody foam as the pickup men rode up and Tom pivoted out of the saddle. He kicked out of his chaps and went back to the chutes, the crowd still roaring, and the men at the chutes stepped back, making way, watching him in silence. Even the old man with the gimpy legs said nothing. Then the last ride made his ride, and the day's totals were announced. Tom Black was top man again. He was packing his gear when the head judge, a gaunt old-timer with a white mustache, came over and said, "You got a craw full of cockleburrs, son. Any special reason?" Tom looked at him and shrugged. "What are you trying to do, kill yourself or kill every horse you straddle?" "I rode them clean, didn't I?" Tom demanded. The judge sucked his teeth a moment. "Look, son, forget it, whatever it is. Yes, you rode clean. You could be a champion in the big time, maybe, but if you keep on the way you're going, you won't live to see the day." "Does it matter?" Tom asked. The judge saw the look in his eyes and walked away. Late that night, around midnight, there was a banging at the door. Tom roused slowly, went to the door expecting Red to lurch in. Instead, there was the gimpy-legged old man. "Your red-headed partner," he said. "He's in the hoosgow." "Drunk?" "Drunk as a fiddler's bitch." "Thanks. You gonna leave him there?" "Yes." Tom closed the door and went back to bed. The next morning he went to the stable and looked at the two saddle horses, debated for several minutes, then went out to the truck and the trailer. He unhitched the trailer and drove the truck downtown to a garage. He traded it in on a second-hand black Buick convertible, paying the difference from the money he had taken from Red's pocket. He had them put the trailer hitch on the Buick, loaded the saddles and bedrolls in the car's trunk, and then drove back to the livery stable. He hitched on the trailer and left the outfit parked there while he ate lunch. Then he went to the arena for the final go-round. He won the finals with the same kind of all-out horse-killing ride he'd made twice before, and he clinched top spot in the averages by a big margin. The old man helped him pack his gear, then went with him to the office to get his purse money. He gave the old man $25. Then they went to the livery stable, loaded the horses in the trailer, and Tom drove downtown and parked at the jail. The jailer sent him to the justice of the peace, and Tom paid Red's fine and got an order for his release. Red was still in a drunken stupor in a cell, but the jailer helped Tom wrap him in a blanket and load him into the back seat of the Buick. Then Tom headed for home. He drove till about 10 o'clock that night, then pulled off the road, got a blanket for himself, and slept in the front seat till dawn. Red was still dead to the world when Tom took to the road again. It was late morning before Tom heard him groaning and glanced back to see him hunched on the back seat, holding his head in both hands. Another half hour and Red tried to climb over the front seat. He almost fell out, and Tom stopped the car long enough to let Red get in beside him. Red's hands were shaky and his face was the color of an old gray blanket with two smoldering spark holes for eyes. He licked his dry lips and asked, his eyes shut, "Where are we?" "We passed Fort Stockton a little way back." Red opened his eyes and looked at Tom, then closed them tight before he looked again. His mouth fell open. "My God, who are you?" He stared and licked his lips again. "You're a Tom, aren't you?" Then he grinned a silly grin. "You got a haircut and a pink shirt, you goddamn dude." Tom drove in silence. Finally, Red asked, "What happened?" "I paid your fine and got you out of jail." "That's right, they locked me up. Got to fighting, I guess." "Probably." Another silence. Then Red looked around, felt the upholstery, put his hand on the dash, and asked, "Whose car is this?" "Mine." Red tried to turn and look behind, but winced and held his head between his hands. What'd you do, sell the horses in the trailer? No, they're hitched on. I didn't even sell your saddle. Good. Then Red asked, You ride? Yes. You win? I won. Red straightened up, felt in his pockets. He searched them one by one. Finally he said, Somebody rolled me. I did. When? After the first go-round. I must have still had a pretty good wad, didn't I? Quite a bit. Red was silent a long time. At last he said, Mio used to roll me. I don't know how much that old chili eater took off me, but plenty. Now you're doing it. He shook his head, winced again, covered his eyes with his hands. I never could save a dime, he said. Somebody always took it off me. Then when I was a kid, it was my old man. When he didn't have field work for me, he hired me out, then took my wages. Then it was Doc Barlow. He paid me $1 every Saturday, and if I didn't spend it before bedtime, he stole it out of my pants. Then it was Mio. Now it's you. Red wasn't complaining. He was just stating a sad, unemotional fact. They went through Pecos and kept going northwest. The sign said Carlsbad was 85 miles ahead. The Delaware Mountains loomed off to the left on the skyline with the Guadalupes beyond to the north. Red sat staring ahead, unseeing. Finally he said, Doc Barlow had a billy goat whiskers, and he wore a top hat and a fancy vest and a big gold watch chain across his belly. No watch, just that chain. I ran away from home and was 12-year-old squirt working for my keep at the Madisonville livery barn, and Doc Barlow came to town and gave me a job helping him sell Kickapoo elixir. Great stuff, that elixir. Half raw corn liquor, half branch water, and strong coffee, with a handful of quinine in every tubful to make it taste bad. We'd bottle it and sold it at every crossroads in South Texas. He sat in silence several minutes, then went on. We sold Kickapoo elixir 2 years, hand running. Then the doc turned to revivaling and worked cures by laying on hands. He preached the loudest sermons you ever heard, and I passed the hat. But it was his laying on of hands he was best at, especially with the women. The young, pretty ones, mostly. Then one night he laid hands on the wrong woman, and her man caught him at it. After that, I had to take jobs as a cowhand, till I met up with Mio and took to rodeoing. He sighed. If Doc Barlow had just stuck to the elixir, we'd have made a fortune. He looked at Tom again. We'd have made a fortune back there in Uvalde County if you hadn't gotten so stiff-necked, Tom. No, Red. You won, you said? I won. I guess you're pretty good, Tom. Another silence. Then Red said, We'll go home and rest up. Then, after the hot weather, we'll go to California. No. We could clean up out in California. No, Red, I'm all through with that. All through. What you got in mind, Tom? I'm riding for keeps from here on. Big time? Yes. Red sighed. Always wanted to see that Odessa show, and Fort Worth and Texarkana. He reached for the big names, Nampa, Torrance, Wolf Point, Calgary, Denver, Albuquerque. He was silent again. Then he said, I'm glad you didn't sell my saddle, Tom. Fellow sells his saddle, he's just about at the end of his rope. The spidery legs of a water tower, sign of a small town, were visible on the skyline, 8 or 10 miles ahead. Red saw the tower and said, Could you maybe stop up there, Tom, and let me get a bottle of the old elixir? I've got a hell of a hangover. I'll stop. Red reached in his pocket, found nothing there, glanced at Tom, then sat disconsolate. When they reached the edge of town, Tom slowed up and eased down the dusty street till he came to the local bar and grill. He parked and gave Red a $5 bill. Red went in, was gone 5 minutes, and came back with his bottle. Then they went home.